What exactly did the Philippines get in that arbitral ruling and what we did not get?
Okay, of course we have to understand yung context. It's under UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. It has nothing to do with the issue of sovereignty. It doesn't define who owns this and that, basically defining our rights under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. We basically ask two things. Number one, we ask the tribunal to come out with an opinion regarding China's 9-dash line. Is it valid or legal under UNCLOS? And second, of course, we ask them to define what is an island. So those basically two issues we raise because, again, when it comes to UNCLOS, it has nothing to do with sovereignty. It has, of course, have something to do with what we call our territorial rights, as defined, of course, under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea.
We want to define an island to define our exclusive
if there,
economic zone.
There are rocks, there are shoals.
Okay.
A country, if it's within our 200-mile exclusive economic zone, we exercise territorial rights, not territoriality. So it has to be clear.
Over an island.
Over rocks.
Okay. Over rocks.
Over islands.
Yeah. Okay, over rocks. Okay. Okay, and then what did we not get again?
Again, the issue of who owns this or that.
Yeah, so that is unsettled. It's not a territorial issue.
Because that can only be settled under, of course, the International Court of Justice.
Sige, sir. So, unahin natin yung 9-dash line. That, of course, that's an over-encompassing line drawn by China over, what, 95% of the South China Sea?
Almost 85% of the South China Sea.
Which almost borders Palawan, diba?
Yeah, borders
the
almost.
The way that they drew it. So, what UNCLOS said was, what the arbitral ruling said was that the 9-dash line is not
invalid. Of course, we have to understand, ano yung basis ng China's 9-dash line? It's based on the notion of what you call historic claim. China said that on the basis of the fact that those waters and islands had been explored by Chinese navigators and sailors in the past, those waters and islands belong to China. UNCLOS said, no, it's invalid for two reasons. Number one, once you join UNCLOS, you denounce all those historic claims. Start tayo sa baseline. So ang basis of course, would be from your coast, your territorial waters, then of course your exclusive economic zone. Once you join it, but of course, sabi ng tribunal, China has basically violated UNCLOS because once you become a member, you have to renounce all those claims. Second, of course, is that, yes, it accepted that those waters had been navigated by Chinese sailors, but it's not only China. Chinese navigators that have navigated. They've been navigated by almost all the nations. Our ancestors, the Indonesians, the Malaysians. It's a sea common to all. So it also did not challenge, it's not only, basically negated China's legality, but also negated China's historic claim. Basically stating China has no historic basis for claiming those waters because the waters in the South China Sea are waters common to all.
Well, you might find it strange that we're asking these questions all over again 2 years after the arbitral ruling was came out. But to be frank about it, a lot of people seem to misunderstand what the ruling said. There are a lot of misconceptions that have been coming out.
Because again, it's a technicality of the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea.
For example, I have.
But of course, I have to emphasize, I'm not a lawyer.
Yes, sir, I understand that. But for example, a lot of people seem to think that with the arbitral ruling, we now own Spratlys.
Again, it has nothing to do with sovereignty or ownership. It's a matter of what rights can we exercise, or how our rights are prevented. How we're being prevented by China from exercising those rights under, of course, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, because both the Philippines and China are signatories to UNCLOS. So you have, of course, the responsibility to adhere and abide by the provisions of the United Nations Convention.
So, in layman's terms, hindi pinag-usapan kung sino may-ari ng Spratlys.
No, never.
Pinag-usapan lamang kung
ano yung rights natin?
Our economic rights.
Economic rights.
Or specifically, territorial rights, not territory. Territorial. Iba yun. Now, this is a social construct, a contract under UNCLOS. Now, again, you have to understand yung history ng UNCLOS. In the 1950s, of course, it has something to do with resources, especially oil and marine resources. So they developed, of course, it was a convention held for so many years, then eventually, of course, it was settled in 1982.